It's been moved and seconded to return to public session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions?
Is this everybody?
Yes. Let's see. Okay. And I know Mr. Leader was here, so if we could stand and salute the flag in the back of the room, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have a couple things to add to the agenda.
Okay, would you just give us the notice of posting and then tell me what you would like to add?
This notice was posted in each of our schools, on our website, at the SAU office, and we had sent it to each of the town offices.
And what would you like to add to the agenda?
We have received correspondence from the Teachers Association that they wish to add into correspondence. I believe on number 9 for policies for second reading, we had scratched policy 2B because and we didn't, it is not included in your packet. We did not approve it for first reading. We referred it back to policy committee.
Oh, that's right. That's my fault because I just was,
Yep. And also, under other business, or you tell me where you want it, either other business or under strategic plan reports, I do have the plan to implement the retention of grade 5 in the elementary school, so you
I
can...
had that under communications.
Okay.
Okay.
And you also had asked me if we could give you an update on the connected math study and the learning studios.
Oh,
so
yes,
tell
I
me
had a
where...
question okay, so under core, that will be,
Under
I had a
core.
question for Mr. Chase's, or two questions from something in Mr. Chase's report, and I asked the superintendent about that.
Okay.
So, thank you.
And I also...
There is
under-
a sign-up sheet for attendance here in the front in pink agendas.
I also have a...
Nice picture of Josh.
A
That was
picture
in the
of
paper.
Josh.
I saw that.
I don't know, Josh, did you get to see your picture from Rotary? Yeah, it's coming around, so take an extra one for your family.
So we want to recognize and congratulate you, Josh, for being the winner of the 2012 Rotary Speech Contest. And your winning speech about the Rotary's motto of service above self. Now you move on to the next level of competition in Lebanon. Has that already happened? And what happened there?
Didn't do well, as I went.
It was a good experience though,
Yeah.
right? So you could try again? You're a junior, right? So you still have next year. Okay. Well, I'm really happy to see this young man in the audience again because we've recognized you before. Mr. Eddie O'Malley, if you want to come forward. And what a great picture was in the paper. I was reading that article myself. And, oh, you're a senior.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I read that whole article about you, and I know that we have recognized you before. You're an excellent athlete. Do you need an extra copy of the paper? Is that all right if I give him this?
Sure.
Do you need an extra copy of the paper? This is Eddie O'Malley, who's just been named, tell us how far you got.
What?
How far you got in the wrestling.
That's fine. State champion. And 2 times.
Speak up so that they.
2 times state champion.
2-time state champion, wow. And
First ever for Newfound to have back-to-back state championships.
Excellent, and we want to congratulate you. And what are you going to do after graduation?
Probably go to college somewhere.
Good. Well, congratulations, and this is the second time we've been able to recognize you, and we're very proud of your accomplishments.
And this year, I would like the board to know that we don't have a wrestling team this year. And Eddie and his mom were undaunted by the fact that there were not enough students that were interested. So we worked really hard to find a neighboring school district that was glad to have Eddie join their ranks, but he wrestles as a newfound wrestler, and you've been going to Winnisquam. And so he's put in the extra time and effort to do that extra commuting, and it's been a lot of extra effort, and we're just so proud of you that, number one, that you didn't give up when we didn't have a team, and the second state championship in a row is like, well, yeah, we're very proud of you.
Yeah, I read that earlier article featuring him and how he didn't give up and how he went down to Winnisquam and all the extra hours of traveling down and traveling back. So we appreciate those extra efforts too, and that just shows your perseverance, which will stand you in good stead no matter what you do after graduation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Okay. In your packet, you have 4 sets of minutes. The first one is January 16th, which was at the SAU office. I was not present. Are there any omissions or corrections? Mr. Migliore, I think you sent your URLs in, but they're not in the minutes.
I'm going to check.
You did. I still hold that email at home.
Okay. Just a comment, Madam Chair. Throughout almost all of these minutes, I'm concerned about reference to summaries rather than what was recorded. For example,
Speak up so we can hear you, please.
sure. On page 2, lines 60 to 63 is substance versus lines 81 says gave input and suggestions. It's not clear what they were. And line 90, read comments he wants added. Again, not clear. Starting at line 109, there's complete substance recorded there. 122, it says further talked about the law. And this is just consistent with, I don't know, I just found a lot of references that are just further talked about staff support in other districts. I'm going to make a change there to be clear about what I said, rather than just
Are you
saying-
still on the 16th?
No, I'm
January
on,
16th?
I'm
Well,
going.
let's stick to January 16th, please.
Well,
and
okay,
then
but just general comments about recording of the minutes, I think needs to be what was said in summary form.
Okay, are there any corrections, Mr. Leoto? for
I
January 16th?
had sent some corrections in, and I think they are made, but I support Vincent's comments, and I would ask Amy, is there something that you need that you're not getting to help those comments be as Vincent asked them to be?
Well, it's up to you guys how you want it done. I mean, if you want it word for word exactly, the minutes are gonna be really
No,
long.
I don't think
You
that's what
want
he,
it
don't think that's what he's
succinct.
asked for. I think
It's,
he's asked for when there's a comment that describes what someone said. He had something to say about this topic, that if that's all one says, it doesn't add anything to the minutes. And I think you need to summarize what he said in a sentence or two using the substance of what he said. He said, law so-and-so applies here, or it doesn't apply here, or I feel that the text should include these words. Those are the kinds of things that need to be here. A verbatim would take way too long. I'm not asking for that. But there's a middle ground.
so do you have actual changes to the line that you want me to put in, or?
Well, you have the tape. I mean, presumably you have the tape.
Well, so where do you want me exactly to change? It's,
Well, I'm not sure that I can answer your question as I sit here, but I would say that in future minutes, as you come to a point which you're going to summarize as so-and-so had something to say, that you listen to that portion of the tape and try and distill down in a few words what he had to say, or she had to say. Locked up. So what are we going to do with the URLs? You're going to,
What is it that you gentlemen who attended the meeting would like to do?
short of listening to the tape, I'm not sure I can make a substantive comment because I did not take minutes, and there were just the four of us. I guess I would ask those who were in attendance, is it worth listening through the tape and making specific comments? And if that's the case, I'll be glad to do that.
I don't think we need to do that. I don't have any corrections for the 16, other than to add the URLs, which I do have for January 16th.
Do you have them with you now?
Yes.
Okay. Would you please give them to her now, even though they were emailed to her and to me? Please. So is there a motion to approve January 16th as amended? Because we at least have to...
I'm not clear what you want me to amend. This is the meeting that took place in the
You have-
FAU.
At a minimum, the URLs have to go in there,
Okay.
which were sent to you.
All right.
So
what
he's
is my
going to
email?
get, Mr. Migliore is writing them down,
Okay.
and he's going to give them to you. So that's, therefore, the minutes would be approved as amended. I
With the
don't-
URLs.
Excuse
Just
me.
with the URLs.
Right.
Right,
Okay.
Mary,
yes.
This is the
did
16th.
did anyone amend line 10?
Oh, yes. I did, but I guess it didn't make it.
It says,
Yeah.
9 to 10 says Dan Rosner, Arsenal, Bristol.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It says Dan Rosner, Arsenal,
It's
And then
under
Bristol.
public present, line 9 to 10.
and it's something's missing.
Are we on the February 4th or still?
Yeah, Dan
January
Rosner
16th.
wasn't there.
January
16th.
16th.
All right.
The line, it starts on line 9 and continues to line 10. It looks like maybe two names got combined.
Yeah, because Mr.
Dan
Rosner
was
was
not
not there that night.
Correct.
I thought it was a guy who was named Dan Rosner Arsenal myself. So-
Yeah.
Knowing I
What
wasn't
are the
there, which is
odds
why I
of-
didn't bother to review them, or else I would have thought that.
What are the odds of that? Well, I wonder if it automatically fills in Rosner
Yeah,
when you
it-
pick.
it's a shortcut I have, and I just didn't catch it when I
Yeah,
went through.
okay.
Okay, that,
So Dan Arsenal.
I had-
is that-
Found my place in my phone.
I'd corrected that in the note I
Dan
sent to
Rosner's
Sue, but
there.
I guess it didn't make it.
Yeah,
Well,
that's all I've got.
I don't know.
Had to have
we
something.
compared
Yeah.
and we complimented him.
So I would move that with those two corrections, the correction of Mr. Arsenault's name and the addition of the URLs, that the minutes be accepted.
Okay, that's amended. Is there a second? All those in favor of approving the January 16th minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Sue, did you say anything?
I wasn't there.
I
so
wasn't there
I
either.
should-
Those opposed, nay. Abstentions, I'm going to abstain. Okay, so the gentlemen all vote in favor?
Yes.
So that would be five. Oh, no, Mr.
Belbin.
Belbin is sugaring, so he is not here tonight. That's what he told us at our last meeting. Okay, now you have the very long February 4th first deliberative session minutes. Are there corrections or omissions?
God help us.
They're 7 pages long.
Yeah.
Amy, line 18, halfway through, that is Brendan Kernan, Kernen.
Where are you? Line?
Line 18,
Page 1, line 18.
and, I'm not sure of spelling of other names, but do we want to include that we had 2 people from the press there that day? I know we don't usually,
We usually do put it in the minutes.
yeah, so we had,
Do we have 2 or 3?
we had,
You were there.
the citizen person did not come. She called me after the fact and said that her car had broken down on the way there. But
The Concord
Laura-
Concord Monitor was there.
Laura Mulkern was there.
Okay, on line 43, the amount was 21,597,525. In numbers, she had it correct, but then she wrote 20,597,000. It should be 21
I'm
million.
sorry, what line are you on? I'm
That's
having trouble
line
hearing.
43.
I don't know why.
43.
43.
These are all stuck up.
43. Just add 21, not 20 million, 21 million in the
How come I can't find it?
narrative of
Oh, I
it.
see, yeah.
And the dollar
It's on
sign
the-
that
Yeah, on
has
page
numbers
1.
on it.
Back of the other
Yeah,
minutes. The end of the other.
the 16th.
Any other corrections? If you would give the page number and then the line number, it would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, bear with me a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Page number and then line number, please. Sue?
Okay, page 1, line 46, required by Precious Actions, probably previous, I don't know. It probably was Precious, but.
Previous precious action.
And then at the end of that same line, 46, it says or by law, and then there's an of. Is that,
Or.
It should
is that
be-
or?
Or.
Okay, all right. Let's see if I get-
Are you ready with more, Sue?
Yeah, 140, okay. Page 3, line 143, seconded the amendment.
Right.
Line 161, I think loose should be lose.
What line?
161, page 3, loose should be lose, I think. Those that. There's also in Vincent's statement on page 7, line 345. Says the employees of part-time workers as currently.
That's his statement. That's word
Is
for
that what
word
that's-
what he gave her.
What do you mean by that?
He gave her a document and she put it in the body of the minutes. All I did was reduce the type size to, so
Okay.
that's word for word from Mr. Migliori, so I don't think you can change it. Do you have any other corrections, Sue?
Nope.
Okay.
That's it.
Mr. Migliori, on the first deliberative session, February 4th.
Yeah, I have a question on line 132, page 3. It reads, the
I'm
district,
sorry, what line?
132,
Okay.
131 and 2. It says, the district data task force information is back up nationally, and this is not the way to get a good education for our kids.
That doesn't make any sense.
Makes
No.
no sense.
I don't know what he said, but
Is it backed
I
up,
don't think
maybe?
it was that.
It's probably back to.
Perhaps you could, is this on tape as well?
Videotape and
Well,
all
it's
that.
on videotape.
High quality videotape.
Thank you.
Well, I had a question on that. I didn't understand.
Amy, on page 6, line 299 and 302, Karen Perazzo, I don't, unless I'm missing it, I didn't see her listed in your list of people who spoke up front. And that would be
You said 299?
299 and 301, and I believe that is, I think it's Porrazzo. But I don't see her listed in your names of people who spoke, and she is from New Hampton, which was correct.
There were a few people who didn't sign
Mhm.
here, so I kind of have to guess.
And then on page, I just want to go back to the point I made earlier, but on page 4, line 211, 10 and 11, when you reference, there was discussion about rules of how the voting works, amendments, discussions. That's perfectly acceptable because that is something that is referenceable, and you don't need to include whatever the substance was in that case. But if you go to line, on page 6, I think this is very important. On page, line 290, it mentions, it says, "The moderator noted the ballots were counted 266 no, 256 yes. The amendment is defeated." I think it should also say, "With 2 ballots completed incorrectly, which if counted would have made the margin of defeat only 8 votes, not 10. That, I think, is very important history of the deliberative session that should be in the minutes.
Repeat, please, with 2 ballots.
Yeah, comma after defeated, with 2 ballots completed incorrectly, which if counted would have made the margin of defeat only 8 votes, comma, not 10. That's real meat. The message is go to the deliberative session. And I think we should record that.
Do you have any others, Mr. Miguel?
I don't believe so. I think
February
Sue-
4th, does anyone else have any for February 4th?
Sue talked to you. I do have a question.
Is there a motion to approve February 4th as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the February 4th first deliberative session as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? So that's 6001. Then you have February 13th, our regular board meeting. Are there corrections on this, Sue? The page number and the line?
Line 1, page 1, line 20, I think that's Max stamp.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Page 5, line 235. What I said was, if the tax cap goes in, there is no room for additional debt service, such as additional building projects.
Such as, I'm sorry, what?
Building projects.
Mr. Janesh, your name is spelled Jeness. So you've got that spelled Janes throughout. So on line 21, John Jeness, Jenness, and if you could just find and replace it throughout the document.
Sue, did you have another one? Were you still looking, or?
Let me just,
Do we know who this person is?
Mr. Miguel, are you ready for some corrections
Yeah,
now?
I got a couple, page 3, I don't know that we need to add this, but I did say it on line 153. The Stafford School Board wanted to change the date for testing from May to October, or October to May, and this was passed by the delegation and explained why, motivated for convenience of the
I'm sorry, I
vendor.
can't. I got that sentence and then in what?
What do you want added after the word delegation?
And explained why, motivated for the convenience of the vendor. That's an essential point, I think. And then on page 4, line 183, to hold the deliberative session on a Saturday with a snow date, on a Saturday also. I want to be really clear about that. I did say that. Then on page 5, line 221, I believe that should be effective, not affected. Correct?
221? Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then on 225, it says Vincent Paul Migliori further talked about the support staff in other districts. And it should also say being half that of NASD. That's the substance. One other, let's see. Line 287, page 6, line 287. It's, that whole sentence, 287 and 288, is completely wrong. I think it should start with, he says they can deal with it and he wants, wait a minute. It should say, can't read my scratch here. Let me read it in context. It says, Vincent Paul Migliori talked about calling a board meeting and the laws to go about it. He doesn't disagree that is how it would be traditionally handled, but this is an unusual year. He says they can deal with it and he wants to hear from the public, and I guess that's okay, but I want to add attending tonight and what they think about this and other topics. Vincent Paul Migliori explicitly disagreed with Mr. Rosner and said it only took 3 board members to call another meeting prior to any deadlines.
Vincent, do you have this written down?
Yes.
Okay. You can just give that to me after.
And then I have a question on 292 and 293. What were those intended to?
Those were the field trips.
Those are,
Those were the field trips that later on in the agenda were approved.
oh, okay.
What's the lowercase a for in front of field trips and other business?
Must be a typo.
Is that discussion item?
The discussion items have, as you can see in your agenda tonight, they have an A, B, C, D, E.
Oh,
She was not following that. She was not following that.
okay.
Page 8, line 389, the actual motion. Should read at the end of the sentence, with a snow date on the 2nd Saturday.
Yeah, sure.
And then I'm questioning on 395, where the motion, Lloyd Belbin motion, the Laconia Daily Sun be included with the other newspapers as a paper of record for all notifications of the school board. I thought this was to add the Laconia Sun as the 3rd paper of record to the Citizen and the Record. So, I mean, we discussed that as doing it that way. Did he modify the motion? Okay. I know that was the intent.
Mhm.
So if that could be corrected.
It doesn't say that? Said to be included with the others, meaning it would add to it?
Well, again, I made it clear that it was to be,
No,
I thought it was to be
yeah.
3rd paper of record and I named the citizen in the record.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's the hometown voice too, but it's
Mhm,
not the paper of record.
Mhm.
I think that's,
What is it? Do you have something written that you want added there?
well, I thought the motion was that Laconia Daily Sun be added as the third paper of record with the other newspapers. The Record and the
So instead
Citizen.
of saying to be included with the other newspapers as a paper of record, you wanted to say be the third paper of record?
Right, with the other newspapers and naming them the Record, Enterprise, and the Citizen.
The Record, Enterprise, and the Citizen, so name those as the
So
other
you want me
two.
to name them
Right.
specifically?
Do you have any others?
No.
Mr. McGuire? Sue, do you have one?
Yes, page 6, line 268. There were a couple of questions I asked, but the answers weren't there, and I thought that was pertinent. Asked about recess for the 5th graders. I mean, this doesn't apply anymore, but sometime in the future, who knows? And Marie said they would have recess. And I asked about gym, and Marie explained the schedule, but she said they would have it for 1/3 of the year, I believe. 1/3 of the year.
The
Okay.
total number of minutes
Would be-
would be more than they got, but it would be concentrated into 1/3 of the year in a trimester, right?
Anything else?
Oh, one more. Same page, page 6, line 284, prepare a nomination list. That's all I have.
Mr. McLeary, did you have any URLs for the February 13th meeting? Because I don't remember getting an email from you. Usually you do it the night of the meeting. You're very good to send it to the clerk with a copy to the chair. But I looked through my emails and I couldn't find one.
I do, and if I didn't send them, I do have them.
Yeah, so you'll give that to the clerk tonight. You can probably use the other piece of paper you already gave her. or
And
whatever.
I'm actually giving her the
Okay,
other
good.
amendment, I'll include it.
So you will add that. Any others? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the February 13th minutes as amended. So moved, thank you. Second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the February 13th minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions, 6001. Then you have the February 27th minutes. Are there omissions or corrections? This was a member of the SAU board. It was primarily a non-public session for the superintendent's evaluation. I have the URLs there from Mr. Migliori. Are there any omissions?
Move we approve them as written?
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the February 27th minutes as written.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded, Mr. Reinhardt.
Recommend.
All those in favor, Mr. Reinhardt? Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions, 6001. Thank you. Now, under announcements, correspondence, and reports, you have in your packet a student council report from the middle school. And I saw in the newspaper where the Bristol House of Pizza donated to the 8th grade class trip. That was a nice picture. And the Caper Conference that Dr. Ross has brought to the school district for a number of years. The 7th graders are eagerly going to that this month, right? It's always in March.
I'd like to extend an invitation to any board members that would like to attend. We take all of the 7th graders to the New Hampton school. They are on vacation that week, and they, as community partners, donate their facilities. And through grant funding, we cover the cost of meals for all of the 7th graders and their parents. And we provide a keynote speaker. This year it will be Officer Jennifer Frank from Plymouth State University, who is a renowned speaker about internet safety. She has an incredibly important message that's highly entertaining but very informative about the dangers of some social networking that people don't realize. Then we have 2 workshops that there's a complete list of options to attend, and students will attend those either with their parents or separately. We have art, music, dance, phys ed, some communication workshops, etc. Then we have a lovely luncheon with the parents and kids together, and afterwards we will have a keynote with Rich Reggioni, who is formerly of Recycled Percussion, who does drumming with the kids on Home Depot plastic buckets. And it's phenomenal what he does with the kids. And so he is bringing his mother this year to talk about her influence on his good decision-making as a youngster. So it's a wonderful day if you can come and enjoy the day and just catch a flavor for it. It's March 23rd, beginning at 8 o'clock, registration at the New Hampton Prep School. Josh, did you
I wonder
have
if, in reading the student council report, I wonder if the sixth graders who were addressed in the second paragraph as working on the atom bomb have come to the attention of the United Nations.
It just says they're working on the atom. It does not
Yeah,
say
I
bomb.
understand. That's what Ahmadinejad says, well, we're just doing it for fun.
Josh, do you have a report you'd like to give for the high school?
Sure. In the past month, there were a few students named for the NHIAA scholar athletes, those of which were Claudia Heward, Hallie Gelderman, Shannon Tucker, and Lily Worthen. It's really good to see student athletes do well at the high school.
Means that they keep up their grades while they are busy also being an athlete, so they have to be commended.
There's a minimum of a B+ average, so that's, and then also in here is Eddie, who was recognized earlier. Let's see. Student council has, it was on the 7th of March, I believe, last week. The Red Cross blood drive was hosted in the gym. We received a lot of positive feedback from the Red Cross, and they plan on coming back again next year, so just keeping that going. That's about it.
Oh, don't skip Winter Carnival.
Oh, yeah, that. Yes.
Josh is being modest. Josh organized this year's Winter Carnival, and it was the most fun-filled, talented group of kids performing with not one single discipline issue for the entire day due to a highly structured variety of activities. You were wonderful, Josh. You did a wonderful job organizing. You did a wonderful job emceeing. I think you should tell the board your joke.
I think we could just pass on that one.
Tell them the one about the chicken and the...
Oh, so why did the physics chicken cross the road?
The physics chicken?
Yes.
I don't know, Josh, why did the physics chicken cross the road?
Because the chicken was in motion, and a chicken in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an outside vehicle.
And then tell the other one, the Mobius.
Oh, why did the chicken cross the Mobius strip? To get to the same side.
So those among us who are geeks really get these, but Josh did a great job of filling in between. There wasn't a minute of downtime, and as I said, not a single discipline issue for the entire day, which really speaks to a high level of coordination and organization, and a side of you I just have never seen before. You rock. But thank you for a great job with that.
And the superintendent didn't cancel school. Like I think happened last year on
That was a
the
nice
carnival.
relief.
You have in your packets the reports from the principals and under Bridgewater Hebron Village School, and Mrs. Connors here, about the Mrs. Burkholm's 4th grade class with Lieutenant Jim Nealon, New Hampshire Fish and Game, and Mrs. Connor, the guidance counselor. They made 5 wood duck nesting boxes as part of a guidance class community service project. And this gives the birds a safe home and a safe place to lay their eggs. Do you have any comment you'd like to make that? It was I was thrilled when I read that. I checked it up and I went, oh,
I
that's
was trying to figure
wonderful.
out what you were going to read that involved me. It's like, what was she going to say? No, it was great. The kids were fantastic, and there were some kids clearly who knew how to swing a hammer, and there were some kids who had their first experience with it, so that they were learning something new and loved it. So, and they generated the idea, so that was even better.
Excellent.
As
And
you-
then-
As you predicted, we have running children.
Yes, well, I was told that we would have running children, and that's why we have the doors closed, because they're practicing their spring musical play. The New Hampton school has started the fifth grade, their DARE classes, thanks to the New Hampton Police Department. And I have a couple from the middle school, but the superintendent's going to explain it in a few minutes. And Mr. Rossner's reported, and there's a letter here in the packet about an update with the New Hampton Fire Department regarding the New Hampton Community School. We had not heard from the fire department for a few months after some letters last fall. And I appreciate all the work that you and Chip Kraus have done on this project, and thank you for giving us the letter. Has there been a response? So, I mean, I know you said you're going to...
Excuse me, I have not responded to their letter, and I don't know that one is warranted. The way we left it at the end of our in-person meeting was that Chip's going to have the set of specs prepared by the end of March. I'm going to give the fire department the opportunity to review them, sign off on them prior to going out to bid, which will be a new process from what we did in Bristol, but I think it'll help the process along. And then they would review, they committed to reviewing them during the month of April, which gives me May 1 to go out to bid and for work to be done during the summer.
Thank you.
But it was a very productive meeting in terms of coming to a rational solution versus just
The long list.
a long list of purely by-the-book
Right.
solutions.
Right. Does anyone have any comments or questions for any of the principals' report in your packet or for Mr. Rossner? Sue?
Well, I just happened to notice that we do actually teach history at the middle school, for anyone who was asking. But, you know, things like Israel, the Great Depression, the Holocaust, World War II, these are all things that are relevant to the events that are happening in the world today. And I think that they do need these, and I'm glad to see that we're on top of it. The other thing was, let me see, an assembly permit, I think, has been issued for New Hampton. Is that for the multi-purpose room, or?
Yes,
Do you know what the number of people is, or?
not off the top of my head.
Yeah, okay.
But we have them posted in 3 buildings in Bristol. And we do have scheduled, I've spoken with Tom Oster, we're going to take care of the Danbury inspection, which hasn't happened recently enough. We're going to take care of Danbury this month.
Do you have anything else, Sue?
No.
John, I think I saw your hand.
So I noticed that we've had 4 firms that are wishing to
Speak up.
give us, we've had 4 firms that wish to make a proposal for auditing this year.
Yes. I think I had alerted you a few months ago that I was considering putting out an RFP for audit services. And so I was pleased that I got the number of responses I did. Not when I say response, people who are interested, I've given them the RFP document. They're due back on March 29th. My goal is to come to the board at the April business meeting and make a recommendation for a new auditor. If I find one of the responses to be more in the interest of the district than the existing relationship. I think that the cyclical change of auditors is healthy. I'm concerned about costs and the way our current auditor has substantially increased their price and their charges over the last, they've just completed their 4th audit with us. And the RFP document does require the proposer to lock in their price for a minimum of 3 years with a 2-year extension after that at the district's option.
Thank you very much for that. John, do you have any other questions?
And I also just wanted to mention that Bodzik and Sanderson, who was previously the district's auditor, and my understanding walked away 4 years ago, they are one of the people who are interested.
Oh, really?
Yep.
They said back then that they just couldn't, do it on time. They were so busy, and if we're late, the tax rate gets set late, and...
We had a clarity of vision discussion about that subject and schedules. And as well as one of their primary auditors who did work for them in this district, who's out on his own with a new firm, a guy named, I want to say his name is Tim Green. He's got his own firm now. He's one of the auditors as well. One of the firms that is responding to the RFP as well.
Mr. Leota?
Going back to the school reports,
Yes?
and note the results presented to us, which were also discussed in our previous board meeting, for the NECAP results for the middle school, and a brief commentary on the NECAP scores for the high school, both pointing to continued progress. Clearly, those of us in the board, and certainly those of us on the data task force, will parse these out into more detail, but on the face of it, I think those populations need to be commended for two things. For one, continuous progress,
Right.
and for the second one, to keeping that progress and their efforts in front of us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I was very pleased to see the increases in the middle school, and then turned the page and read the increases in the high school, so thank you. Any other comments about the principals' reports that are on the purple paper?
I would just like to call attention to, as part of the effort to further improve NECAP scores, there's the 5th paragraph on the high school report that says we have modified the 2012-13 math program of studies to include a double block algebra seminars. So when students come into the high school, they basically will take algebra either in 1 year, or they'll have a double block and take basically a doubling of algebra to get that really good, solid foundation before moving on. So I think that's something I don't want people to miss as just an intro, but Mike O'Malley will explain it even further when he comes back for his next update.
Okay, thank you. I put under, on the agenda in this section, the Grout Scholarship. In 1996, William Grout from Alexandria started the Grout Scholarship and signed an agreement with the school district. And there has been a scholarship given in his name at Newfound Regional High School for a number of years. I was contacted recently that Mr. Grout wished to make a slight adjustment to that scholarship. There had been a restriction placed on what major the student would be in order to be eligible, and it was something to do with outdoors, recreation, fish and game, that type of wildlife. I believe Mr. Grout is the keeper of Wellington State Park. He works for the New Hampshire Park Services. This slight change, and I have the document here, I signed on behalf of the school district, and I had the privilege of signing the first scholarship with Mr. Grout. He has taken that restriction off, so it is now open to a deserving student who has been accepted to attend an accredited 2- or 4-year institution. And he is still named as the person who will make the decision. However, if at some point that situation changes, it would be turned over to the school district. So I just would like to thank Mr. Grout publicly for continuing his scholarship, and I think just opening it up, not putting a restriction on the type of major, will certainly help our students tremendously.
Mary,
And-
do we know how many scholarships we give annually, or
From this one or totally?
or totally?
I don't know it off the top of my head, but if you ever go to the evening, I'm so impressed with the amount of money that individuals and companies and the Franklin Bank, the Rotary is extremely generous. But I see Dr. Ross making a little note, so.
I'll get that report for you.
Would that be from guidance, perhaps?
Yes, I'll get that from guidance.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Yep.
Total dollar value?
The guidance, I'm sorry, I probably should have talked. On the Newfound High School website, on the guidance link, they have a whole list.
Oh, good, thank you.
Is that a complete list? Marie, do you know if that's a complete list?
I don't know.
Because sometimes they're not all awarded.
Right, is it what's available or what has been awarded?
I'll double check with Monica to get the
Good.
parameters around that list.
Thank you.
And last month when we were here, we had our first public hearing for the two articles on the warrant, Article 3 about tax cap and Article 6 about rescinding being an official ballot town or an SB2 district. We were required to have public hearings in all 7 towns, and I just want to report to the board that those did occur according to the schedule that we had published. We had the first one here, so you were all here for the Bristol one. The next night we were in Danbury, and Mr. Migliori and Mr. Johnson joined me, and there were 9 members of the public. The next afternoon in Bridgewater, we were at Bridgewater Village School. Mr. Migliori joined me, and there were 4 members of the public. Thursday night in Hebron, there were 5 members of the public, including State Representative Suzanne Smith. That Saturday, we were at the New Hampton Community School, and Mr. Reinhardt and Mr. Migliori joined me, and we had 3 members of the public. The following week in Alexandria, we were at the Alexandria Municipal Building, not the Old Town Hall. And Mr. Lieto and Ms. Cheney joined me, and we had 7 members of the public. And the last hearing was Saturday, February 25th in Groton. And Sue joined me, and we had 2 members of the public. So I thank the board members who also came out to the hearings. Under strategic plan reports.
This is more correspondence.
And tonight at your table on purple paper is a letter from the Newfound Area Teachers Association to the school board regarding RIF, which is reduction in force. And this is from the president of the Teachers Association. According to policy GCPA, the Teachers Association sends this written statement. We are truly saddened that this RIF has to take place. We are hopeful that the policy was followed as written. One thing we would like to request, could the board make a retirement incentive to those teachers who may choose to retire at this time? It may save a job or 2 from being cut this year. Again, we are truly saddened by the reduction in force of classroom teachers. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Deirdre Conway, President of the Newfound Area Teachers Association. Under strategic plan reports,
Mary,
excuse me.
I had a question on the student services report. Appropriate to ask now?
Yep.
At the bottom, the math, I couldn't figure out the math and wondered if it wouldn't be a good idea to include the total number of students, because later on in going through the report, I discovered what I guess our current enrollment is now is 1,286. So in going back and doing that math, I guess comes out to 17.88%, which is closer to 18% than 17, but be that as it may. Could we include, Marie, the total number of students, which appears to fluctuate somewhat, so that would be important.
At the time with the 2 weeks report was the current total.
Yeah. And this continues to perplex me because we started the year with what I thought was 1325 after coming 1309, so I couldn't get that math to work, and then I discovered a change in the January number. So,
And to be clear, the number that we have to use for all calculations for grants and percentages is frozen as of October 1.
Right.
And I asked Sue Cross to update us. She writes to each of the school secretaries to give you live reports at that time. I'm referring back to this whole, who's coming, who's going, who moved in. We had a family who had moved out of our district, and we made appropriate reassignments or reductions in whoever was working with those students. And this family has just moved back in. And as I was browsing some school board minutes in different districts, I noticed in one district that they, as a school board, actually approved the additional hiring of any paraprofessional for student needs. We haven't done that in the past, and I know that we've had conversations about people really wanting to have that level of transparency, which we could make available through numbers. We can't talk about names. But in the spirit of that, with the student, we have one autistic student that's returning to the district, and with the autism services that it would cost through the end of this fiscal year, that's $8,000, and the estimated cost for next year is $25,000. This money is not currently in the budget, and Dan usually handles that through special ed contingency lines. We often say we don't know who's going to move in, move out, etc. So I just offered to the board if you wanted to change the practice of how we do this, and that's a conversation for you to ponder and come back to me later. But it was just something I had noticed in another district, that they actually go in a non-public session right in the middle of the board meeting, discuss the need for additional paraprofessionals to meet student needs. My only concern is that we only meet monthly, and the student moves in, and I've actually delayed the hiring of this position for a week, just pending this conversation. And we're trying to cover needs, but that is taking personnel away from other students who legally need to have those needs covered, and we're cautious to be able to sustain that on a daily basis. So I just know we have had these conversations in the past in general, and I just wondered if there might be a solution to having more frequent updates, more specifically about this one came, this one needs a para, we need to hire a para, we can repurpose someone if someone moves out. Those are the questions that I hope that we'll get some direction as we move forward.
Thank you. Under strategic, Lou?
Following up on Marie's comment, not particular to the hiring or not hiring of paraprofessionals, but just to report back to the board that I spent a morning in the high school and visited about 5 classrooms at my own choice, and except for one, and also without announcement. And so I kind of walked in on teachers who graciously...
After reporting to the principal's office first?
After reporting to the principal.
I knew you would, but I just didn't want to make sure that it's clear that you
Yep.
report to the principal's office first.
Well, in fact, I had talked to Michael and set it up, and so what he did was to say, there'll be a strange person in the building, do not shoot, do not call the police, but don't answer any of his questions. I just want to report that I visited a severe handicap program, what appeared to me to be a college prep trigonometry program, and then some science programs. And because it was unannounced and unplanned, I walked into a program, stood there for 10 minutes before I figured out it was a study hall. He took attendance and he did all these other things, and I kept saying, well, what are you going to teach, And he said, this is study hall. Thank you. But for the board's benefit, I really endorsed that with prior notification. I saw some instructive things in the handicap education program, that I thought I knew about but did not. And I saw some very energizing things in the mathematics program about a person who could maintain the interest of 20-some-odd juniors, talk to them at their level, keep the class rolling and humor injected appropriately, and absolutely never lose the thread of trigonometry.
Wonderful.
It just was impressive. So
Thank you very
encourage you all to
much
go.
for doing that and for telling us about it. Okay, under strategic plan reports, when I read Mr. Chase's report from the middle school, there was a page that talked about connected math study and learning studios. And they sounded very positive, but I really was not clear on what it meant. So I emailed the superintendent late last night, not expecting her to read it till today, and asked her if she would please clarify and share briefly with us tonight, because I think they are important projects. So thank you.
Thank you. Connected Math Program comes out of Michigan, and we have sent a team of math teachers to Connected Math University every summer for the past 3 years, I believe. So our teachers are trained by the authors of the curriculum and have a very deep understanding of how the program works, and every year they come back even more energized. So therefore, we were very honored that 2 of our teachers in the 6th grade level, and then 2 in the 8th grade level, being Mr. DeVarney and Tom Donahue, our special ed math teacher who co-teach the class in 6th grade, Rebecca Chase and Eileen O'Donnell. They've been selected to do a study, which is basically a research design study, to find out if there is a benefit to changing the format of the textbook itself. Textbook authors tend to want to put illustrations, photos, pictures, and a lot of words around the math instruction that for some students they hypothesize this could be distracting. So they have taken the identical program with the same math concepts and they have leaned it out. And so we're actually teaching the same units with both books, alternating which class is doing which one at which time, to see there's a very specific protocol that's being used. And at the end of the year, West Ed is going to determine and report back to Connected Math University the results of the study. So it was an honor to be chosen for that. And we're each going to do 2 units, so 2 units in grade 6 and 2 units in grade 8, and that will be funded by the U.S. Department of Education. So we were very honored that some of our teachers were chosen to participate. So it's not an additional course, it's the same course. It's not a different program, it's the same program. It's a different style. I don't know, Josh, as a student, do you think this sounds like it might be a benefit?
I mean, it could. It's a new hypothesis. Never really heard anything like it, so it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Do you find some of your textbooks to be distracting with extraneous things in them, or?
Not really, but
Do you have
again,
a good filter?
yeah. Again, there's no real comparison, so.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a protocol for the conduct of the research?
Right.
Can you share that?
I don't have a copy of that with me.
Can you get one?
We can get one, sure. I think we can get one.
And then the learning studio?
Any other questions on that piece? Learning studios, I think I have briefly mentioned in the past that I had attended some trainings from NCTAP, which is the National Commission on Teaching in America's Future. And the gentleman who really has piloted this whole concept said that it started when he was in Maryland. He lives in Maryland. And they found that there was a shortage of earth science teachers that were graduating from universities in Maryland to teach freshman level earth science. And he thought how strange it is that we are next door to the richest earth science resources in the country, with the Goddard Space Center and NASA, and we can't find teachers to teach earth science. So he developed a concept called learning studios, which he says are similar in concept to an art studio, where artists would come together and share expertise and creative ideas, or a dance studio where you would have an expert dance instructor, some students who want to learn how to dance, some experienced dancers who would all come together and share their expertise. So in a learning studio, we actually have a team from the 6th grade, and we also have a team at the high school, and Beth Colby is working with the high school team. So they're going to some training that basically says, what are you teaching that despite your best efforts, you are not seeing results from students the way that you wish you would see? And the teachers identify a challenge. And then resident volunteers who are retired engineers, retired scientists, etc., come and partner with the teachers and students, and they design a project, and they work together on the project. The example that was used by the earth science teachers is they said plate tectonics was something confusing, so they designed and built a shake table that is very similar to what's used by geologists. When they built the shake table, they were generating so much data, students did not know how to interpret the data. They went up and got calculus kids from 12th grade, came down and participated in the learning studio. They got tech ed kids across the hall to help build the table. At the end of the year, they had a new piece of equipment in the school. They had volunteers participating. The teachers were well trained, and they would go on and learn something else. So that's what we're about. And we will report on the project they select and their progress. And we do have some community volunteers already. And if anyone is watching this by Channel 24 and finds it intriguing and would like to participate, they can contact us.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. I knew both of them were exciting curricular issues, but I didn't quite understand it. So thank you for explaining it. I don't think we have anything under infrastructure, but under communications, for which means parents, personnel, public, and pupils. Would you like to give an update about the 5th grade, since last month the board voted to keep the 5th grade students in the elementary schools?
I believe that you have tasked Dan and I to come up with a plan to implement retaining the 5th graders. So I brought a graphic to demonstrate, and I've also put this into a handout, and I've made a few extra copies that we can pass out to the public. So I will start.
Do you want to hold that up there?
Actually, I'm going to start with half of it. So I will start with, when asked to reduce the budget originally, way back when we started this process, we were asked if we could possibly come up with a $20 million scenario. And in that case, we said, way back when, that if we were to consolidate our smallest school with 50 students, we could put them into Bristol Elementary if we had moved the 5th grade to the middle school. And as you know, the board decided we were not going to consolidate our school, but they had not yet taken action on what we would do with the 5th grade. So we were asked to cost out the savings that would have occurred had we moved the 5th grade to the middle school. And Dan and I estimated that we would save one 5th grade teacher. The original concept was there were 34 5th graders in Bridgewater Hebron Village School. If we moved them all to the middle school, there were 97 total, and rather than having 5 different 5th grade teachers, we could teach groups of 25 with 4 teachers. So we said we could accommodate a reduction for one fifth-grade teacher. We also said that by moving 100 students into the middle school, we could serve the needs for information communication technology classes at the elementary level. With 2 IC teachers, we currently have 3, so we reduced one of those. We also said we could provide instrumental music lessons at the middle school. We have a 3/10 of a position. Every 10 days, she teaches 3 days out of 10, and we could reduce that. And we hypothesized that if we were to combine our students from the 4 elementary schools, or 3 elementary schools that currently house 5th graders, that we could hopefully use some paraprofessionals to do dual duty. So if I have one student who needed a para in one school and another in another school, if all those kids were in the same building, we could combine them into a class and have one person oversee maybe 3 or 4 and hopefully save 2 paraprofessional positions. We then, Dan, with his estimation, figured how much retirement, Social Security, retirement, and the health plans, hypothetically, he actually chose some staff members for examples. Of course, we have not in any way determined which staff members would have been reduced. That'll come in the next meeting. And he came up with an estimate of $257,900, a figure to which you have heard me refer several times during the budget process and on the deliberative session floor as saving $258,000 with these cuts. At the last board meeting, after having listened to many sources of input, the board voted, I believe it was a 4-3 vote, to direct the superintendent, with Dan's help, how we would come back with a proposed plan to keep grade 5 in the elementary schools and what that cost would be. Now, a simplistic view would be to say, if we cut, now these cuts, if you look at the bottom of the sheet, these cuts are already contained in the $21,597,525 number that is on the ballot tomorrow for the budget. These cuts are part of that budget. So if we were not to make these cuts, we would have had to find these cuts somewhere else. An alternative to finding all of these cuts somewhere else was to find some of these cuts, which we did this way. So instead of saying that we were going to cut a 5th grade position, which we have already saved in the budget, this is the money that's already been saved, we looked at our school enrollment numbers and we noticed that in the Bristol Elementary School, we still had one group of students in 1st grade that had 3 teachers for, at that time, 39 students. That was 13 students per class. Most other classes we had raised to the level of 20 students. So I have eliminated a 1st grade position instead of the 5th grade position we would have cut had we gone to the middle school. And because it was an instead of, there is no cost impact. That costs $0 because I cut that out. Are we clear on that? So now the bottom line is still the same. We have not changed the money at all. We were going to cut a 5th grade position. Instead, we cut a 1st grade position. I want to stop and make sure that that's clear. Are we we're good with that? Okay. The second line, we went down to that information communication technology position. And we analyzed the fact that because we have cut 9 elementary positions, we have increased class sizes. If you recall, in Danbury Elementary School, we combined a 1-2 and we combined a 3-4. So we are actually asking these 3 people in 4 schools to teach 7 fewer classes. And we, as an administrative team, with consulting all the principals, decided that they can easily make a schedule that provides information communication technology services to all of our elementary students with 2 ICT teachers instead of the 3 that we currently have. So we retained that cut. We did not find money to put that back in. It was cut here. We're keeping it cut here. There's no dollar impact. Are we good with that? Is that a quizzical look, or does that make sense? So the bottom line still, after those two changes, still $21,597,525. We have heard from the public, and in particular from our esteemed colleague, Mr. Martin, that he is very in support of our music program. We are thrilled with the performances from our music department at our elementary school to start with, our middle school and our high school. We do not want to affect the quality of those programs. So we had proposed cutting a 3/10 instrumental music piece, and we said, we're not going to cut that. So we're going to need to find the money to keep that there. We're going to need to come up with that by reducing somewhere else in the budget. So we're going to put 13.9 on our list of money that we need to find. In the first two positions, we didn't need to find the money because we kept those cuts. This one, we're not going to keep that cut. We're going to try to find the money and put that back in.
I'll come in and volunteer some services.
We then had 2 paras. We need those 2 paras because we are keeping the kids in the separate schools, and with all due diligence, as we go through the entire list of who has special education IEPs, we will try as we can to reduce the number of paras that will be required. But until we finish the season in spring and finish all of the evaluations, we can't tell you that we can retain that cut. So we need to find the $38,200 to replace those people back into the budget. Calculating all of these numbers that we just talked about, the reduction in salary for those 2 full-time positions, plus health insurance, plus FICA and retirement, we came up with a bottom line total for this new plan that we will need to find $77,900 to make this new plan of keeping 5th grade in the elementary schools with a different cut of a 1st grade and a continued cut of the ICT. And so if we can show you where we can find the $77,900, we've absorbed $180,000 between these 2 positions and all of the related benefits, health insurance, etc. So we are not going to say, it was very accurate to say we would have saved $258,000 with this model by moving the kids to the middle school. We are not going to cut the budget by $258,000 in other places. We are only going to show you $78,000 worth of adjustments in other places due to our new implementation plan. And I'll show you where those places are after I answer any confusing questions about what I just said.
You don't mean confusing questions. We don't ask confusing questions.
If I have confused you, I would be glad to try to clarify.
Are there any questions for the superintendent?
So, the $257,900 that it was gonna cost now only costs $77,900.
Because we've
Keep the 5th grade where we were.
Right. We made these cuts. These are cuts in the budget. And to undo the cuts, we opted not to undo all of the cuts. We kept the cut of a position. We just changed which position we cut. We kept the cut of an...
So how does that save the money?
It doesn't save money. The bottom line on both lines here is $21,597,520.
What the money, if I may, the money it saves is money we have to take from elsewhere to restore to the original organizational plan. of having fifth grade at the elementary schools.
But
We're
my
gonna restore-
question is, why was that 257,900 before, and now it's only 77,000?
May I?
Yep.
Because that's the cost factor for the existing current year fifth grade structure versus how the budget was built at 21,597. Just like when we were asked to add Danbury back in, we didn't add it back in the format it currently exists. We put our collective heads together and came up with a new format that was less expensive. So adding Danbury back in wasn't the 600,000 to 700,000 we originally said cost to operate it. It was only about 300 and change because it's a completely new organizational format for restoring the program. It's not being restored in an identical format, it's being restored in a new concept format.
And the new concept being, we eliminated 2 full-time teaching positions because we combined the first and second grade, and we combined the third and fourth grade, and we reduced the secretarial position in the main office by half-time, which also reduced benefits for that position. So when we restructured Danbury, we did not add in the amount of money we saved by cutting it because we brought it back in a reduced form. So when we cut this model, which is what we are currently using for fifth grade, we're bringing this back in a reduced form. And we've reduced it by $180,000. We made some sacrifices in the first grade class size and in the total population of teachers who teach ICT. So these X's represent they're gone in the budget here, and we did not bring them back.
If we had brought them back, we'd have to pull more numbers or more dollars from other programs because obviously the bottom line can't change.
So I thought it was your clear direction as a board to say, come up with a plan that can bring fifth grade back to the elementary school, but hopefully not at the whole full price that it was already reduced by. I don't think you explicitly stated that.
I don't agree. I think that the direction was bring fifth grade back to the local schools and don't charge us a nickel for that. That is,
Exactly.
absorb it in
Right.
the existing budget.
So the bottom line on this number is exactly the same bottom line. It is $21,597,525. We absorbed $180,000, and then when you agree that that's what we absorbed, we will tell you where we propose to take the other $78,000. So I'm bringing back a modified program. I'm bringing back less than we have now. We've cut more. Yes, no? Make sense?
I think I understand what you said.
I understand it. Mr. McLeod? Do you have questions?
I guess the question I have is, when do we know what the real bottom line is? Because,
The real bottom line is the same as it was. It's $21,597,000.
no, I mean when we're building a budget, because before, we took a real fine pencil toward the budget and came up with 21,597,525.
Right.
And that consisted of a $258,000 fifth grade change.
Right.
We don't want to change the fifth grade.
Right.
So now we are changing it, but only $77,000.
I didn't change the fifth grade. Now I've changed first grade. I gave you back the fifth grade just the way it was, with just the number, and now I've changed a first grade. That was one change. It's an instead of. The board has unfettered authority to transfer money from line item to
But
line
then,
item.
I get
So when you
that.
built the budget, we build it with these line items in mind.
I get that, but
Yep.
I guess my question becomes now, why didn't we do that before?
I have an answer for that, because I think I know where you were going to go, and that is, we probably could have arrived at 21, I'm going to say $21,600,000, half a dozen different ways. And the administration said, this is the way we prefer. We're now saying, we're not going to do that, so find one of your other ways. This is a crummier way, but one we're going to do because the community doesn't want to do the way proposed. It's crummier because of not the 180, but because of the implications of the 78 or 79 that she's going to tell us about. If we had looked, I'm going to predict, if we had looked at the proposal on the left, moving the 5th grade, and before we heard from the community, and compared it to the proposal on the right, all the way down, for the whole $258,000, we might well have said, gee, no, some of these things that we're deferring are not as good, and you're telling us that moving the 5th grade is okay, so let's do that. We didn't have to. We could have chosen Plan B, which is on the right. I think that gets at the sense of your question.
And you could always say, if you've made these sacrifices, the question I'm hearing you ask, I'll paraphrase and you tell me if I'm understanding you. I'm hearing you say, if you're willing to sacrifice a 1st grade now and an ICT, well, we sacrifice the same ICT, why didn't you sacrifice both a 5th grade and a 1st grade earlier? That's what I'm hearing you ask. And
That's a decent question.
is that what I'm hearing you ask? Why didn't you lower the budget by another classroom earlier? Is that what I'm hearing you say? Kind of, sort of?
Does anyone else have a question about this besides me?
Well, the question that she just asked is a very legitimate one. Could we have built a budget which had the 2 cuts on the right, just the top 2, the 1st grade teacher and the ICT teacher, built into it as well as moving the 5th grade, and therefore had a budget which was
$180,000 less.
Okay, $180,000 less. Why didn't we do that then?
And when I came to you with, if you recall, I asked, I think it was around September when we had heard from the Budget Committee that they had a $20 million number, and I asked, what number do you as a board wish to aim toward, that's actually ending in a preposition, whatever. I asked you what number would you like, and you said, prepare a budget.
Yep.
So what I directed Dan to do is I said, let's split the difference between the 20 million and the current budget, which was 23.9 at the time, and we came up with a number in the middle, about 21.6. And then I put on the table, but if you want to add Danbury in, put another 600,000 in. And if you want the 5th grade, put another 258,000 in. And you said, no, we want that number, but we also want you to absorb Danbury. So we had to come up with a Plan B and cut something else to fit that into the 21.6, and we did. And then we went to the floor. Some conversations were had about 5th grade. At the last board meeting, we collectively, in a slight, simple majority, said, maybe it's not the right time to make this move yet, for a variety of reasons. So then that same directive comes my way. Come up with Plan B on how you're going to get that 258. Because you've got that, now, at this point in the budget process, this bottom line is the bottom line. That is the budget. That is the budget on the warrant. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're asking, but they did exactly the same thing when we said, no, you're not closing Danbury. Shuffle. They did, and they moved the 5th grade to the middle school and avoided closing Danbury. Now we're saying, no, we don't want the 5th grade going to the middle school. Shuffle. So they did another little shuffle, and now the 5th graders are staying where they are. Could we have taken that out of the budget before? Maybe, but I don't think the appetite was here to do that anyway. We were satisfied with the budget. Everybody worked hard at it. I think they've done a great job shifting things around, and it calms the people that have 5th graders. So let's see if it works. Next year's another year. We'll take a look at everything.
Well, it makes me want to say, go back and do it again and come up with something even better. Because every time we ask, we get a better plan.
It's not something better, it's something different. If you're the parent of a first grader in Bristol, you don't think this is something better. If you're the parent of someone who loves ICT classes and really gets excited when your first and second grader comes home with incredibly new technological advances in their repertoire, you don't think this is a better plan. So when you have a static budget, bottom line, which we're aiming to maintain, we need to make tough choices. And it's all about which tough choices are the most palatable to the board.
Well, but there's more to it, and I'll go now to the lines on the bottom half of the page you gave out.
Are
which
you ready for that now?
I don't know if you are, but I am.
I am, okay.
And that's the other $80,000, because the tough choices, and I'm not going to criticize them, but each of those choices represent an increased risk.
Right.
We're going to defer something, we're going to delay something, we're going to move off a plan a little bit. I got to believe that those risks are tolerable, otherwise they wouldn't be presented to us. But each time, to answer your question, go back and shuffle it again. The way to keep cutting at some point is to increase risk, increase exposure. And we can do that. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And I think we're at the juncture now that going back and shuffling again would begin to seriously undermine the credibility of the budget.
We would like to explain to you, if you're ready, why we risked this much and not more in each of these lines. We have, Jan, do you want to explain this, or do you want me to, or?
Which part?
The bottom of the sheet, did you?
Which line on the bottom of the sheet?
Salary contingency is the 1,100-113 line.
Yep.
We had about $50,000 in that line.
It's a 1% calculated every year. It's a function. And we don't do it through every line of the budget. We just do it through the three largest salary lines in the budget, being the 1,100, 112, 1,200, 112, and 2,600, 112. We put in a 1% contingency in the event that we have a formula that calculates a 1% contingency for changes in certification, changes in personnel based on resignations or terminations or replacement staff, what have you. You know, a teacher retires, you budget a baseline salary, and the most qualified candidate is already got on step 8. So there's a need for salary contingency. So this year at the 1% level, between the 1,100 and 1,200 lines combined, there's about $50,000. I think that given where our overall staffing of teachers is going, converting from current year to next year, there's probably going to be a minimal amount of turnover other than what we've planned.
Right.
Therefore, I see the potential to use some of that contingency because we are further along in the year and the unknowns shrink as the year progresses. I think we're getting to fewer and fewer unknowns by this point in our fiscal year about next year, and we can use some of that contingency line to pay for these costs.
And furthermore, we have a reduction in force, and we knew how many positions we were going to have to reduce, but we didn't know which people. And because my esteemed colleague budgets to the dollar for salaries, he pulled some names, hypothetically, that may have been those who would have been reduced in force before we actually had the process. It's a grueling process. We are being very cautious. We have worked with a consultant. We have worked with legal counsel, and we're finalizing that final list. So his numbers are going to change from what he guessed in the fall as to which salaries may be reduced, and I think he was pretty wise in his approach. However, we are talking about a $30,000 differential perhaps, and so that's why we did not take more than $20,000 from that line, because we know we at least have to cover that. Now again, if other people come and go or leave or retire and we hire people lower, that number will reduce.
Or increase.
Or increase.
which is why we want to leave some portion of the contingency fund there.
Understood?
The second line is
The roof.
the roof. I would convert the BES project into 2 phases versus 1. And that just seemed like an opportunity. If we need to find $80,000, that was one of the places I saw as potential.
From a architectural or building contractor's point of view, is that easily converted into 2?
You know, if it were the middle school or the high school, I'd be more concerned about it, but Bristol Elementary is in fact 4 buildings. So, and with parapets and everything between them. So if you break it into phases, I think that's pretty realistic and feasible without affecting the structural integrity of the new product versus the older product.
And you can do the whole thing in pieces for no increased cost?
I think that remains to be seen. I mean, that would be the goal. There wouldn't be any increased cost to the total, but I think certainly the roofing markets are gonna change year over year, so prices might go up for a different, but, it'll be a process of managing it as effectively as possible.
Yeah, I wasn't asking about changes in prices, because we don't have any control about that. But I'm more asking about, well, if you want me to do this in 2 pieces, I have to do X more.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be X more. I think, I think realistic, you look at 2 mobilization charges versus 1. But, that's
not a big part.
I don't think that's a big piece of it. I think, a roofing job is 99% of that job is gonna be labor and materials, not mobilization. The third thing on the list
IT equipment
was, we put in a chunk of money to work towards the school board's goal of having laptops be no more than 5 years old and desktops more than 8 years old. We weren't going to get all the way there next year, but there was $100,000 put in towards that goal. We can just do a few, not do as much work on that goal next year.
And we are behind that schedule already.
Oh, we are definitely behind that schedule. Once again, this is the kind of thing that we'll definitely make a substantial amount of progress with $80,000 instead of $100,000. As much progress? No, but significant progress, yes. And the last item on the list.
Well, even to continue that
Yep.
thought, Dan and I have had discussions. We've seen technology change so rapidly over the last couple of years. I've recently toured some classrooms in other districts that are using iPads instead of buying laptops. And tablet computers, which are less expensive than the computers we're using, that are as functional for the purposes that are necessary to those students in those grade levels. And so as technology changes its formats and availability of products, we might be able to service more smaller types of units and handheld devices and still provide students with access. So those are conversations that we'll have as we revamp our technology plan. And then I'll speak to the last one, the professional development line. We currently have in our support staff handbook, which the policy committee approves every year and then the board reviews and approves. Actually, I should say the policy committee reviews it and then the board approves it. We have an allowance for support staff to access some professional development money. We have no cap on that. They could each access up to a certain dollar amount. So Dan said if we just reduce the total amount by $5,000 and say first come, first serve, and we just put a cap on the total amount that's available. We provide a lot of training opportunities for our support staff through grant funding with our CINI money and our DINI money for districts in need of improvement. And I feel like our staff is very highly trained, and I think that with grant money we could make that difference up. So.
In the past year, have we had to deny any requests
No.
based on cost?
No. Like I said, because of all the extra money we have, when we are designated as a school in need of improvement, we have to set 10% of our Title I allowance just for professional development, so we do it school-wide, and that includes them. When you're identified as a district in need of improvement, you have to set 20% of all of your Title I money aside for district-wide improvement, and we will have that funding available again next year. So that's our $80,000, and again, that is our recommendation on how to absorb different kinds of cuts to keep the bottom line, and change which sacrifices we need to make. When you cut $2.3 million, you have to make sacrifices in a lot of different places, and that's what the rest of the year is all about, is deciding what the board ultimately wants once we finally do know that bottom line.
Which we'll know on Wednesday.
I would make a motion, we accept the proposed changes to retain the 5th grade at their current schools.
I'll second that.
Well, we did approve last meeting to keep the 5th grade at the school, so now you're moving to accept the financial part of how we're going to do that. Is there further discussion on this motion to accept these proposed changes in order to accomplish that goal of keeping the 5th grade students in their elementary schools?
Yes, as a matter of procedure, the action items take place the
Yep.
second half of the meeting.
Yep.
So I would submit that we have yet to hear from the public. And there are
We'll put it under
discussion items.
under action items. And I'll call for it at that time.
I only
Thank
know
you.
this because I have often attempted to make
Yep,
motions too
yep,
early.
I know that, Mr. Migliore. Okay, touche. Thank you both very much, Mr. Rossner and Dr. Ross. In your board packet, the last thing under communications is the results of the annual school board evaluating itself using our policy AFA-E. I appreciate the fact that all 7 board members responded. You could give either a paper response to me or do SurveyMonkey, and Sue Cross has been tallying the SurveyMonkey responses. The same document was put on SurveyMonkey for the administrators, the staff, and the community, and Sue Cross very kindly gathered all of that data and gave the same type of average responses. So last night I created the second spreadsheet that was put at your table tonight, which is only the average responses from the 4 different groups: the board, the administrators, the staff, and the community. And I know that the summary of the 4 different groups was at your table tonight, so you haven't time to really look at it.
Do we have tallies for the categories? Number, for example, of community respondents?
On the
It's at
last
the very
page.
last page.
Oh, yes, I see it.
So I want to
But
thank.
we did better at the hearings on the articles.
Yeah. In terms of the head count.
So I thank people for participating, and I thank Sue Cross for putting it on SurveyMonkey and tallying all the results and giving me the averages. Okay, it's now time in our agenda to hear from the public, and we welcome your comments about issues, not individuals, that are on the agenda tonight. I ask that you be recognized by the chair, give your town and your name, please. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Your name and town, sir.
I'm a little thick.
Your name and town, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm Ray Campbell. I live on Wycombe Road, Bristol.
Thank you.
I think I'm just a little thick, but I don't quite understand this. You have an overall, or had an overall budget of $21,597,525. I may be off by $1 or $2 here. And included in that program was this $259,900 that you had to worry about. And I salute you for,
It wasn't included in the budget, the cut was included in the budget. We had already cut that out of that number.
you had already cut that
Yes.
from the budget.
Right.
So it was not then included in the 21,595? Oh, all right, fine.
That's
Thank
why
you.
there was an amendment at the first deliberative session to restore that $258,000 so that the fifth grade students would stay in the elementary schools. That amendment was defeated by a small margin. So that $258,000 had already been taken out of the budget in order to get to the number in the warrant.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying.
You're welcome. Mr. Martin, I saw your hand, but I called him Mr. Campbell first.
Well, he's taller and better looking than I am.
A lot of people.
On the dime.
From just an overview.
Your name and town, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry, Neil Martin, Peaked Hill Road, Bristol. What is kind of interesting to me is the ongoing concept of taking out of, and I know we don't have a line item budget requirement in this state, I know that. But just as a general good business practice, I know you don't necessarily like to hear the business part, but it is. It's interesting to me when, it's said, oh, we can, find something, we can move something around. And it just doesn't seem to make any sense from a generic budgeting process, because I'm very much influenced by a zero-based budgeting thing, which should be truly, fully implemented. You'd have a lot of this stuff more apparent. But I heard the words, we have to sacrifice and absorb. I don't know that ever comes up in a business setting. Who are you going to sacrifice? What are those things in specific, in kind of like specific terms? Because it always seems as though no matter what the budget was, that we continue to teach, we continue to have graduates. If somebody said we can only raise $20 million, and this is where maybe a crisis management approach, you know, some options. I mean, this economy may rebound, it may not. But we still are following a cumulative, budget approach. There's no doubt about it. I don't care what what is said about that. That is not out of the order in referring to that. And if someone said we need $20 million because that's all the taxpayers can come up with, that sometimes is the case in the publicly traded company, sometimes the privately owned company. But we don't seem to have that kind of a philosophy, that kind of an attitude. And I think, unfortunately, the thought is good because it's always been for the children, and it's wants instead of needs. But I think we have to start here pretty soon in looking at needs and seeing if we can avoid this thing, in spite of the fact that the state only requires, certain things which are minimums. We could come up with something, it seems to me, that would undress every one of these lines and be able to really come up with things. I'm delighted to see that you now have some contingency dollars in. That's great, because then, as you remember, Mary, in the past, I don't think there were many, contingency items, and we know that things can be contingent with a person leaving or coming in and all that. That's great. But in this case, as we're looking about it, I would hope that a real solid attempt, and I don't think anybody here has done truly zero-based budgeting, but it's a great effort, because if you do it, it'll probably take up to next year to complete it. You can what you do is you involve teams, and somebody comes back and reports. You use parents, you use students, everybody knows what is in every line and has a handle, other than, we think, or we can absorb, or we can transfer. Just, it's like sometimes you think you're looking at smoke and mirrors, and I would hope that we could get a little bit more of a business focus, which I think the general public would like, because we are increasingly in a stage of transparency. I mean, all you got to do is read the newspapers. People say, what the heck's that for? And I understand the need to survive, and I understand the need to protect, but our job is to do a couple things. Number one is education of our children. Seems to me another important one is trying to protect the taxpayers, And then and then we go from there. We don't seem to, we're swayed more by the people who are parents of kids in the 5th grade. You know, life is tough, some things have to go, but we're driven by things other than a lot of good, solid business thought, and say, can we go down to the bone? Because as you cut some of these things and you reduce them, we don't get down to a point until someone makes a comment. Then we quickly can lop off 500,000. Where the heck does that come from? Well, I mean, you know, we'll find it. And that to me is a little bit, you know, innocuous. That's all I'm putting out. It just doesn't seem to be quite as documented as I would think, not just myself, but a lot of other, you know, kind of people think that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience? Ms. Connor?
I guess I can't help it. Kathleen Connor, Hebron. I just want to say that I really appreciate that decisions were made to keep the 5th grade in the elementary schools. I can't tell you how many parents over the past 2 weeks have talked to me appreciating that that decision was made. Not that I had anything to do with it per se in that regard, just because I was the guidance counselor, they make those comments to me. So it was very much appreciated. And I do appreciate that there are still concessions being made with this change. It makes the budget tighter, it makes it harder next year if any big changes happen, any switching things around. I know just in our school we've had a lot of kids come and a lot of kids go. You just never know what's going to happen, who's going to come next. So I appreciate it's making it really tight, and I appreciate the willingness to shuffle things and make those tough decisions. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we'll go into our discussion items. You do have 3 policies in your packet for second reading. Evaluation of personnel, awarding of diplomas, and concussions and head injuries. You reviewed this last month and did not make any changes, so they are here in the same format tonight. Are there any questions? This is usually the time of year that we look at the school calendar for the next year, and I'm sure that the superintendent has consulted with Plymouth Regional High School because our students go up there for vocational. So you have in your packet on white paper a proposal, a draft. Dr. Ross?
This year, when the SAU 48 gave us a draft of their calendar, we noticed that they had a teacher workshop day on January 18th, which is the Friday that precedes the Civil Rights Day. We know that we had heard from some parents that, I believe it was Wendy Cantwell, who is the president of the New Hampton Community School PTO, she said that she would request that we would minimize the number of early release days that we provided 2-hour early dismissal so that staff can work on some very important collaboration, planning, professional development. So I approached the teachers union and I said, and the other problem with early release in November, December, and January, especially November and December, is we have an early release day the days preceding holidays. So I went to the union president and I said, what would you think of taking 3 early release days, which would be 2 hours from the Wednesday, the 14th of November, the 12th of December, and January 16th, and putting those three 2-hour slots together and having a work day on January 18th. Students would have it off, and parents could therefore have a 4-day weekend and not have to get daycare, childcare for those 3 months. But then I realized that it would add a day to the teacher's contract. It says they are supposed to work 186 days. That would become a 187th because early release days count. So as a trade-off, we would dismiss half day for the student last day and the staff last day. And I asked her to take that back to the membership, and my report from her today, after giving this to her a couple of weeks ago, were that people loved the idea of having 6 hours of uninterrupted time. By the time you dismiss the kids and get to the point where you're going to have your 2 hours of discussion, you can't really hit the ground running. So they were in favor of the calendar as proposed. We usually have 6 early release days a year, so I'm not sure that we wouldn't schedule something maybe in March or April, but it minimizes the number of days that parents had objected in the first place.
Did the PTO get exposed to this? And did they have
No,
any-
I go to the union first. The board says to me, hey, let's put a draft out. We can then put it to the PTOs and explain. So this is the first process. I don't think you would adopt it tonight. You would adopt it at the next meeting usually, right? I just put the draft out now, and then you make suggestions of other things you would like me to consider. But we try to minimize the days that we are different from Plymouth, because every day we're different is 2 days that the kids miss in the career and technical education program.
Any comments on the draft calendar? Okay, there are several items of personnel that you discussed in non-public session tonight, so we will not mention them now until you get to your votes. There are 2 field trips, a senior class trip and a music trip. Senior class is going to Upper New York State, and the music trip is to Maine. Excuse me? Yes?
Input. I just want to, I noticed on one of the field trips, there's a plan to use either a van or a personal vehicle. I wanted to just share some information. I belong to a professional group called the New Hampshire Association of School Business Officials. At one of our recent meetings, we had the director of the Department of Safety and a state trooper who is a liaison to the Department of Safety. And what we had was a roundtable discussion led by them on the use of vehicles other than school buses for trips. And it was it's enlightening for me, being one of the junior business administrators in terms of years of service. And there's a very strong sense, partially directed by the Department of Safety and partially from those who've been in the business a lot longer than I have, that strongly advises against using any vehicle other than a school bus for school trips. And there's a recognition that it's more costly. It is more costly to use school buses. But the factors that were cited that I thought were interesting were, number one, something I was aware that obviously drivers who are not school bus drivers aren't held to the same standard in terms of certification, licensing, testing, things like that. But just one of the things that was reviewed was the construction of vehicles that aren't school buses is wildly different from the way school buses are constructed, and the safety factors are extraordinary. And it's I don't want to say a regular occurrence, but it is very, very rare that an accident involving a school bus involves injuries, and it is much more frequent that an accident involving a vehicle with students in it that's not a school bus does result in injuries. And if the appropriate course is for me to go to the policy committee to discuss this, so you can change your policy, that's what I'd follow your recommendation. But I just wanted to bring that up because this is the first field trip using another vehicle that I've seen since I was at that discussion.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Other comments from the board on either trip or the use of a private? I share your concerns. I had questioned that on one other field trip, and I'm very uncomfortable with using personal.
Vans especially, because they put so many students into them, and they really move around the road.
Well, can we amend this at the time that we approve it?
Yes. Does anyone on the board have an item of other business? I've not heard one so far tonight, other than the motion that will be made later about 5th grade. So were there any items of other business from board members? Okay, and if not, we have another part of our agenda for public comments. Are there any comments that the public would like to make at this time before we go into action items where we take votes and conduct our business?
Fred Robinson from Danbury. Marie, you said with the scheduling of the days, condensing your half-days into full days for the teachers. Now, you said it would affect their contract. What effect would that have on the support staff contracts?
Well, currently, the support staff has 183 days, and so currently the support staff does not work any days beyond the student days, but we can keep that at 183 days because that's what's been budgeted. So then they, currently, for the board's information, support staff used to have 187 days. There were 3 days before school started, 1 day at the end of the school year, that they would join teachers for professional development activities. And with a budget cut a couple of years ago, we were able to retain 2 para positions that we would have had to cut by taking we basically figured it was $8,500 per day if you looked at everybody's all the per diem for all of our paras. So we said 2 times 8,500 is 17,000. We could save 2 jobs if we took 4 days off their schedule. So we limited the contract for paras to be 183 days, including 3 paid holidays. So that's what is budgeted, and so we could restore one of those professional development days.
So the days that you condense the half-days into, would they be paid days for the support staff?
They're currently, if we currently have an early release day,
Right.
we've budgeted you for a full day. So if you work and you attend professional development, you get paid for the full day. Some people opt to just take the half day and forfeit the half-day pay. So if we were to have the January 16th or whatever day that was, 18th day, as a full day for professional development, that is the 180th day, technically, of the school year. We're just taking the half day away from the students at the end of the year. So you could attend with the rest of your colleagues.
Okay.
And that's budgeted currently.
All right, thank you.
Good question, though.
Any other comments from the public? Okay. So are you ready for your action items now? The first one are for second reading, the 3 policies. Second reading, if approved, means they become policy. Is there a motion?
Move we adopt the 4 policies listed.
The 3, we had to take off the parental objections to specific course material. We had pulled that last month.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed
But
that.
it's my mistake for putting it on the agenda. I was just
I missed
cutting
it
and
too.
pasting when I
3.
did the agenda.
So that would be GCN, IKFC, and JLCJ.
Yes. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve for second reading, evaluation of personnel, awarding of diplomas, and concussions of head injuries. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions, 6001. Paul.
Paul.
Okay. Doing calendar. This-
And it was only on the GCN and the JLCJ?
No, just cross off the second one. Evaluation of personnel, awarding of diplomas and concussions.
Okay.
Correct. So under personnel, you have a maternity leave, a resignation, a child-rearing leave, retirements, and another resignation. So there's maternity leave for Melissa Scott at Bridgewater Hebron Village School for late May and all of next year, right?
No, just late May.
Just late May.
The remainder of the 2011-12 school year, that's this
Okay.
current year.
Thank you. Is there a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions. Then you have a resignation, excuse me, Lee Ann Ames, the music teacher at the middle school. Is there a motion?
I move we accept the resignation.
Second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to accept her resignation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions. We have a request for a child rearing leave due to an adoption. That's to start later this month for the remainder of the school year from Craig Cardock. Kokoris.
Actually, he has already, the child has been born, and he has already gone down to meet his new son, so it is starting sooner than they thought.
Oh, and it is only for 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. At the middle school, the tech ed teacher at the middle school. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Sue? Oh, John? I'll give John the credit. So. All those in favor, excuse me, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions. Then we have 5 retirements, excuse me, from the teaching staff. Deborah Doe, Janet Brochu, elementary school. Deborah Doe is our vision specialist teacher. She's a lovely lady. Nancy Mills, 40 years of teaching at the high school, English. Bruce Wheeler from the high school for technology education. And Karen Wolf from Bridgewater Hebron School, and she's kindergarten and reading recovery, correct? Mm-hmm. Another lovely lady. They're all very lovely people. Is there a motion to accept with appreciation? These are most of them have been in the district for many, many years.
Can I just clarify that 3 of these were received according to the contract prior to November 1st. Because they have had their 20 years of service, and Dan has budgeted for their retirement benefit that is for 20 years plus. So Karen Wolf, no. Yes, Karen Wolf, Bruce Wheeler, and Debbie Doe. No, Nancy Mills. I think 4 of them. I'm sorry, I thought there were 3. 4 of them.
4 were notified by November 1st.
Right. So they will be able to qualify for the stipend. And then Janet Brochu has recently submitted her retirement, and she has been here 14 years, so she would not get that stipend. But she will get to take care of her grandchild, which is better than the stipend, I think.
Is there a motion to approve?
So
We
moved.
accept these retirements and express our thanks and good wishes to the people involved. Paul seconded it.
Yep. Mr. Leto moved and Mr. Reinhardt seconded to accept the retirements and express our thanks and good wishes to these employees. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Thank you. And we have one resignation that came tonight to the table that you've already discussed in non-public, and that is Mr. Darsney as principal of Bristol Elementary School. Is there a motion?
I think, would you publicly state that that is for the end of the school year, not an immediate
Yep.
resignation?
Effective June 30th, 2012.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept Mr. Darsney's resignation effective June 30th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions?
Likewise, I encourage a letter of regret
With
and good wishes. Thanks, I guess.
thanks and good wishes. Now you have 2 field trips, one for the senior class and one for the music trip to Maine. Is there a motion? You can take them together or separately.
I move we go on their trips.
Could I offer a friendly amendment that we not allow the use of a private car on the music trip?
Will the maker of the motion go along with the friendly amendment?
That's fine. Does that affect the trip?
It affects how many students can go. Currently, they have scheduled a premier coach, and they basically had asked the transportation to transport extra students. So I guess the premier coach does not accommodate, so yeah.
Can I make a suggestion that, being that the school organized the finances around this trip under current board policy, we find, if they do require an additional bus because of attendance, and I think the primary costs of this trip are borne by the students, not by the general fund budget. So if they do require a second bus or a second form of appropriate transportation, to be specific, the district may, I think the district could probably take care of that small incremental difference to find the appropriate transportation. And then once the policy is changed, it would be the responsibility of the building administrators when planning these trips.
That makes sense, right?
Yes, it does.
Got all that?
So what's the motion?
What he just said.
He says they're gonna defray the cost of the bus.
I understand the motion to be to approve both field trips, but on the music trip to not allow private cars, and the district will help with appropriate bus transportation.
So moved.
Okay, Sue?
Second, yes.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Motion carries. Now, for the 5th grade. Earlier, Paul moved and Lou seconded to accept the financial changes as explained to you tonight, to how we are going to finance keeping the 5th graders in the elementary schools. Is there further discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Thank you. Sue, do you have any manifests?
Unless someone else has been in, I do not.
No.
Not tonight.
I have a question. Forgot to bring this up before.
Yes, and what's coming around to you at the table is the report of receipts that was not in your packet. Mr. Rossner had mentioned that all the towns had paid, although this shows Bridgewater not paid.
That's as of February 29th, excuse me. Bridgewater paid their February dues on March 5th.
Thank you. Mr. Migliore, your question?
In the packet for the newsletter this month from the high school, there was the Counselor's Corner information, and there's a Destination College statewide convention. I'm not seeing where that is. Can someone tell me?
I don't know. Oh, it's on the back. And it doesn't say where, it just says that we would be providing buses. So I can ask where that will be.
And it's for about 4 or 5 hours, right?
Right.
I think I read that.
Yeah, it's from 8:30 to 2:30. Yeah. But that's a good.
So we are doing a bus for this.
It says NRHS will be providing a bus for students only who register early on their own. And lunch is provided, and they won't be admitted without prior registration. Sorry. So, if you'd like that, I can ask Monica Jackson where this will be.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I was thinking about going to that.
Okay.
But it's going to depend on where it is.
Okay, I will check.
Yes, I still have that.
Yeah, other business, does anybody wish to discuss the whole idea of
Yep, I
retirement?
just have to find it again because I just buried it. Is that your only question, Mr.
Yes,
McLaren?
thank you.
Okay. Under other business, there was the letter from the Teachers Association. Does the board wish to do anything about the letter? And their request is, could the board make a retirement incentive to those teachers who may choose to retire at this time? It may save a job or two from being cut this year. In other words, if someone decides to retire, even though it's past the deadline for getting the extra incentive, that would be one less position that would be riffed because it would be vacant based on a retirement, correct? That's what it means?
I think the intent of this, the retirement incentive that is referred to in our contract basically is prescribed to say, if you work 20 years, you get, what is it, 0.5% of your salary if you retire at 55 and a full percent if you retire at 60?
You get what you, if you serve at least 20 years in the district and you retire at the age of 55, you get 0.5% of your final salary times the number of years of service. If you're over 60 when you go that option, it's 1% of your final year's salary times the number of years of service.
This would not be a similar consideration for that kind of an incentive. Those people have already put in for that. There are some districts, when they are doing a lot of reduction in force, that would like to provide an incentive for teachers who kind of wanted to think about retiring but weren't really sure they could afford it yet, or health care or whatever. And different districts have done different things. The Londonderry School District just provided an update to the Lakes Region School Administrators, and they put in something that said 1 year they offered, I believe it was 2 years of health insurance for those who retired, because there was that window where you could not yet qualify for Medicaid, et cetera, Medicaid Part B. And then they thought several people would take advantage of that. The benefit to offering a retirement incentive is that people that are on the higher step levels may or may not think they can afford to retire, and then if you say, for example, I think you were going to suggest.
So the business model, from my perspective,
Right,
the
right.
business model makes a lot of sense. So I'll give you some hypothetical numbers. You may choose to follow this model. You establish a pool, current year funds, let's say $60,000, just as a number. And you say, okay, the first 3 teachers who want to retire this year will pay you a $20,000 retirement stipend. The theory is that you're going to replace teachers making $48,000 to $60,000 with teachers making $30,000 to $35,000, call it $38,000, whatever. And that number is not just the 1 year savings that helps offset the cost, and you have to have a long-term approach to this. You can't be a 1 year window, because on a 1 year window, it doesn't necessarily make sense. But I tell you, by a 2 year window, it really starts to make a lot of sense, and you go out 3, 4, 5 years where people are making, where the person is no longer making 60, but the person who theoretically might get riffed if the retirement doesn't take place now stays in the district and makes 30, then 30, and if salaries climb, where right now they're locked into the exact same number, but 30, 31, 32, and those years go out, and you're saving that $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 of salary and associated fringe bet costs like FICA retirement every year for a number of years.
Now, the thing that we discussed at the administrative team meeting when this was bandied about was the persons who are going to have their positions lost due to a reduction in force. At the high school level, we have a few retirements, and we're trying to be creative about, as we've done in the past, absorbing those positions and not having to have someone who's currently employed lose a job. At the elementary level, we have 9 positions to cut. And if we were to offer this retirement incentive, there is no guarantee that people who at the high school level were in uniquely certified areas may choose to retire, and that wouldn't prevent a younger teacher at the elementary level from losing their job because they wouldn't be certified in physics or certified in, just whatever. So there is, if an elementary teacher decided to take advantage of that, there would possibly save a job. And I think, it was a good idea to think about, and then, again, with the hope that fewer teachers would lose, young teachers with young families would be out of a job completely. But that's just the way that it might work out. You never know.
Mr. Widow?
It seems to me, I've seen similar kinds of things done in other districts, and it seems to me that in order for us to really be motivated to take action, we need to have some hardcore analysis, financial analysis of what a plan would look like and what its payback period would be. We can think about the non-monetary components, such as you've just raised, and say there's some risks here for us and make those evaluations. But it's hard to quantitate what the costs would be, and if the costs are not favorable, that's going to be a tough sell.
Well, and the challenge, though, is, and I appreciate your desire for a precise financial picture before you make a decision. However, you never know who's going to take you up on it until you offer it. And that, I could certainly show you immediately, if you like, where the how many people we have at each level.
Yeah.
That's simple. I could throw up on the screen right now if you wanted. But as I know just from going through this process this year for the first time, who I think might be the reductions aren't necessarily what becomes the reductions. And I think that's why the boards have, in the limited amount of investigation I've done, the boards have said, okay, here's a pool, because we believe we have this much money, and it's going to be a one-time offer with these parameters. We can't even target, you can't even target it. You can't go say, hey, we're going to have to rip this person, we're going to.
I understand that, and I wasn't asking for that, but I think you can say, here are some parameters that make some sense, because such a large fraction of our teaching population is at the highest step. I don't expect we're going to draw a lot of the population from the middle steps.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. It's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Because, but you can give us some guidance about, well, here's some kind of limits that you could put on. You gave a particular number value. That's one way of doing it. Another way I've seen it is to say, this is a particular year, like when you're 55 or when you're 60 or something like that. And that's the only time you get to make that decision. You make once in your career. But there are these kinds of variations. And so what I'm asking is, can you build some kind of model that says within these parameters, with the expected rate of attrition in this population, if you kept it for 3 years, it would pay off, or those. I just don't want to just do it.
Laconia did that, where someone would have to put in for it a year in advance, and there was more of an incentive to a younger teacher at the retirement age, because an older teacher was probably planning on retiring soon anyway.
Yeah.
So it's basically an early retirement incentive, and.
I just don't feel adequately prepared to make a decision right now, personally.
Mr. Michelor?
Yes, I think this is an absolutely excellent idea for us to put on the table and collectively bargain next year with the teachers. To put in place some sort of...
We ought to consider it, right?
To put in place some sort of...
Didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
Plan that would give everyone involved in the process an opportunity to evaluate it, including ourselves, along the line that Lou has just elaborated on. What will it cost, whether it's a good idea, who else is doing it, that sort of thing. There's not enough time right now.
Right.
And there could be a board change tomorrow morning.
Yeah, sure.
So I think it's a great thing to put forward for a collective bargaining agreement procedure. and perhaps an incentive to come up with something that would be palatable to both sides.
Speaking of our collective bargaining procedure, our current policy, our current practice in our CBA is to provide a 0.5% if you retire at 55 and 1% at 60, and that is backwards from the incentive to have people retire. You should give them
Earlier.
a higher percentage, so there's an incentive to say, hey, I can afford to retire sooner, rather than having the district spend 5 more years of that higher salary. So I think there's just a logic to that, and again, I'm just reflecting on other districts that have made those things, so that would have to be bargained. The pros and cons of bargaining this type of a thing is, if you put it in the bargaining, if you put it in the CBA, you have to do it every year. Dan doesn't know at the end of every year that he would have that money left. You know what I'm saying?
So that's part of the other piece of the argument that you brought up about the potential of being a new board tomorrow. What I would suggest is that, and I'm not trying to push you into anything, it would come out of this year's funds, because I'm confident I could give you a number that we'll safely have available at the close of business this June to use in this fashion.
What will we do for the support people who want to retire that we've significantly cut health insurance on?
Good question.
I don't think that you would, again, from an economic standpoint, and that's that's an ethical conversation, but from an economic standpoint, to offer someone $15,000 to $20,000 to retire, we would immediately recoup that, because the incoming salary would be $20,000 less, because an entire para's salary altogether rarely hits the $20,000 mark. That's why it doesn't make sense.
Well, but still, it's a legitimate
Right, it's a
question,
legitimate
and there's
thing,
some
right,
ethics there.
Why raise it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I should point out that the district I'm referring to, when I talked about my prior experience, is not a contractual item.
Right.
And that was with malice aforethought.
So if I were to say to the union that the board's response was that they had a discussion about that, they're going to do further study about that and consider it for a future conversation, is that an accurate representation of what was heard?
Without special meetings, it's obviously not going to be able to feasible
Right,
for
right.
this year.
Right.
I think that's fair. Tell them we're mulling it over.
And then perhaps if the conversation can, if you do some analysis, it can be
Tell
brought.
them it would help if they brought pizza to the next board meeting.
I have one very brief item for the board for a non-public session. So are you finished with your public at this point?
I just want to make one comment about the data task force information. I know it's off the subject here, but the figures can tell you a lot of things. But I really would like to know the whys and the hows of why some of these figures are different. I mean, we can't just say, well, they're spending this amount, so we should spend this amount. How are they doing it? I really want to have some more information about those numbers.
I think that was the gist of the objective we gave to the superintendent. It said, and we picked a couple of areas, because you can't do them all at once.
So the plan that we bring back
Use
April
this.
2nd is to say,
Exactly.
and we will visit this place to see this, and we will do, yeah.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Oh, yeah.
was.
Yeah,
Do
we
we
have,
adjourn this meeting, or do we have to go back?
I will entertain a motion to go into non-public session for the purpose of discussing personnel per the RSA on your agenda.
So we'll-
Okay, New Hampton